people, including myself, have been wondering if the new MacBook Pro is more worth it than last year's M1 MacBook Air. So I figured I'd make this video to do a full comparison of the two devices and talk about what I like better on each device. Before I do get into the video, I'm going to kindly ask you guys at home to hit the subscribe button if you like that kind of content. I got the full review of the MacBook Pro coming soon. You don't want to miss that to answer all of your questions. So make sure to subscribe if you like the video. And yeah, let's get into it. So in this video review, I'm going to be talking about the 3 P's: ports, power, and price. And I think those are the more important things, especially to me, with comparing the new MacBook Pro to the old MacBook Air. And I don't want to say old, it's pretty new, but you get what I mean. So starting off with the ports, the big appeal of the new MacBook Pro is the fact that it has more ports on it. This has been a game changer, especially for someone that uses the computer like I do. I use it mostly for video editing and photo editing, so I do really need to take advantage of the ports. And I'm not sad that Apple added these new ports. They are a lifesaver. So we get MagSafe charging, 3 Thunderbolt ports, a headphone jack, an HDMI 2.0 port, and my beloved SD card slot. So the SD card slot is probably the most important port to me on this new MacBook. I'm able to edit photos and thumbnails and whatever I gotta do with a client. I'm able to easily manage my files a lot better on this new MacBook Pro than I ever was on the MacBook Air. I just literally need to take it out of the camera, plug it directly into the laptop, and I'm ready to go. I work with a video partner sometimes, and sometimes we meet up and we do shoots together and I have to take his footage. Sometimes I'd forget my dongle, so it'd just be really annoying, but this time I don't need to worry about anything. Literally take it out the camera, put it into the laptop, and I'm ready to go. So overall, this increases my productivity just by getting the MacBook Pro. Now, if you look at the MacBook Air of the 2020, that only has 2 USB-C ports on one side, and it also has a headphone jack. That is pretty much it. That's all you get on it. You don't get more. And this was definitely something that bugged me with using the MacBook Air after the last year. I made a gripe with the ports because there's only 2 on it. I wish they at least separated the position on the laptop. So instead of having both on the left side, I wish that they had put the other one on the right side, but Apple didn't. Oh yeah, also, like I mentioned, it has MagSafe, and I never thought I'd care about that, but think about it. If you're using MagSafe to charge the computer, that means that you're not using the USB-C ports, meaning you could plug in more things. So 3 USB-C ports on the MacBook Pro is actually 3 USB-C ports on the MacBook Pro versus on the MacBook Air, where you have to share one for charging if your MacBook is ever dead. Okay, let's move on to power, and this one kind of shocked me. I don't know what this was or what the reasoning was. I gotta look more into it, which I will in my full review. The way I use my MacBook Pro is a lot for Final Cut Pro. So I do a lot of editing, and exporting a final file is really important. You want to save down on time. So anything that makes the export quicker is always good. So what I did was I compared the MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro, put a 4K file in both projects. It's the exact same project that I was working on. I want to know how quickly I can export. It's only like a 6-minute video, so it shouldn't take that long and it shouldn't be that much of a problem. Did them at the exact same time, and what happened next kind of blew me away. So the MacBook Air finished in 11 minutes and 37 seconds. And by the time that it was at 100% and fully done rendering, the MacBook Pro was at around 23%, which doesn't make any sense. I know that the M1 Pro is a lot faster than the M1 chip, so I didn't understand. So what I did was I ended up restarting the computer. I ended up making sure that all programs were closed, which they were, and I ended up turning off the Wi-Fi because I figured maybe the Final Cut was trying to render to iCloud or something like that. I'm not sure. So I turned off the Wi-Fi, did the test again, and it ended up going a little bit faster. So it exported the full 4K 6-minute file in 10 minutes and 7 seconds versus 11 minutes and 37 seconds on the MacBook Air. That's like a minute and a half. Now, yes, that does add up if you're exporting a lot of files. Time literally becomes really important, especially if you're working on projects that have a deadline. Every second counts. So if you're looking at it like that, I mean, yes, it's faster, but at the same time, I think that for $1,000 difference, I'm gonna get a lot more speed than just a minute and a half, basically. So I was kind of disappointed in that rendering speed, but I don't know if there was something happening in the background that was limiting my Final Cut export. I've done a couple videos already with this new MacBook, and I thought it was a little bit faster than that. Of course, I didn't time it, but it's just kind of strange that that was happening. In this test, the MacBook Air was not too far apart from the new MacBook Pro. And that is a shocker. The MacBook Air is actually my girlfriend's computer, so we don't have the same configuration, the same thing set up, but I thought that I mentioned it just because it's a Final Cut export, so it should relatively be the same. But yeah, just thought I'd put that out there as well. The MacBook Air was the computer that I was using for about a year before I even sold it for the MacBook Pro, and I was able to edit 4K footage, edit photos, and do all of my things that I need to do for my YouTube channel and my side video company without an issue on this. Like full 4K footage was able to be edited, sliced up, chopped up, exported perfectly on the M1 Air, except that for the most part I did have to run it in a lower quality. But on the MacBook Pro, the new one, I'm able to run it at full quality and export it and still be good. So there's a slight difference in terms of productivity, and I don't know if it's worth the difference. I guess I'll let you guys decide that. But yeah, the MacBook Air is still plenty powerful and it can handle a lot of tasks. Oh yeah, and before I move on from the power, I've been using the MacBook Pro for about 1 week and not one time did I hear the fans go on. So I'm actually not convinced that it even has a fan. I think it's a conspiracy. No, I'm just joking. But seriously, I never heard the fan go on. It doesn't go on. Whereas the MacBook Air is completely fanless, so there's no fan on it. And of course, that's silent. It runs cool all the time, but so does the MacBook Pro. Finally, let's talk about the third P, which is the price. The MacBook Air comes in at $999, whereas the new MacBook Pro comes in at $1,099. So again, that's $1,000 difference. For an extra $1,000, you get a mini LED display with slim bezels, extra ports, more power with the M1 chip, a fan included, extra RAM, MagSafe, and more. Now, some people would say that all the things that I just mentioned makes it worth the extra $1,000. Specifically for me, for example, I'd say that the SD card slot might be worth the extra $1,000, and call me crazy, but that is something that I miss so much. And yeah, I don't want to keep going on it, but I really do miss it, and it makes it worth that $1,000. But for a lot of people, it's not. The HDMI cable is not, and it's not worth it. So if you take that away, take away the ports, what do you get? Do you get like $1,000 worth of power? Probably not, in my opinion. Do you get $1,000 worth of like a better screen? Maybe, but probably not as well. I guess it depends on your usage, but for the most part, I think that it is a really expensive computer, and for a majority of people, you can probably get away with saving the $1,000 buying the MacBook Air. Maybe you're gonna buy an expensive dongle, but I don't know. It is a tricky subject, and this is very subjective. For me personally, the extra $1,000 is worth it, but for a lot of people, I wouldn't recommend paying it just to get this. Unless you have like a high productivity workflow, you need the HDMI port, you need the SD card slot. That definitely makes it worth it, in my opinion. Other random things that I thought I'd mention in the comparison: the display of the MacBook Pro 2021 is like night and day better than the Air, especially when you look at it in the dark. The Air does not display true blacks, whereas the Pro displays true blacks. And obviously this display is bigger on the Pro, coming in at 14.2 inches versus 13.3 inches on the Air. The keyboards are very similar. I don't really notice a big improvement in my typing speeds when using the MacBook Pro versus the MacBook Air. They both don't have the touch bar, which is an amazing thing because I absolutely hated the touch bar on my 2019 MacBook Pro. If you value portability, the Air is also way better as the design is sleeker and it can easily fit in my bag versus the thick boy that is the MacBook Pro. The Air comes in at 2.8 pounds versus 3.5 pounds on the MacBook Pro. The battery on the Air is actually better than the battery on the MacBook Pro, coming in at 18 hours on the Air versus 17 hours on the MacBook Pro. So if you're somebody that is like on campus for the full day or just out and about on the day, every time I say out and about, I just feel so Canadian, out and about. But yeah, if you're out and doing things all day, they both have the P3 color gamut. And also something to mention is that the display of the MacBook Pro is way brighter, coming in at 1000 sustained brightness, 1600 nits peak brightness versus 400 nits brightness on the MacBook Air. Now I do notice a difference, and it's really important, especially if you're color grading videos or if you are editing photos. You're gonna want to get the extra colors, the extra brightness that you're gonna get with the MacBook Pro. So that is definitely a feature that some people alone might think that this is worth the extra money. Okay, so time to answer the $1 million question, which I think I answered already, But to summarize it, no, I don't think that the new MacBook Pro is worth it over the MacBook Air for a majority of people. If you're asking me if it's worth it for me, the answer is yes, just because of the type of work that I do, and I just need that SD card slot, I need the HDMI port. But if you're on a budget or anything like that, or if you already have the M1 MacBook Air and you necessarily do not need these ports, you don't need the extra speed, then you can still get away with using the MacBook Air for like 5 more years, because that computer is a beast. And I do like it. I really do enjoy that computer. But for me, the MacBook Pro is the one for me. And I don't know, maybe next year that'll change as well. There's always going to be something that's next. And I know I need to practice what I preach, but this thing works best for me and I'm not regretting it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I'm going to see you guys in the next one. Peace.